If it weren't for a truly brutal performance by the supporting cast of the Dallas Mavericks, we could have seen all brand new faces in the second round of the playoffs, at least in the Western Conference. And I guess that's where we can start is that Clippers Mavericks game. Luka, 46 points in a loss and a double digit loss at that, basically. And just couldn't get there. There had been in the series guys who had been making their shots, shooting at a high percentage, and just no number two guy really stepped up for Dallas in this game. Of course, Kawhi was fantastic. And then Paul George put in 18 and 10, but that was enough from him. And then Reggie Jackson with a couple of huge threes late in the game. Really, really impressive stuff from him. And normally that's not the guy you want taking those late shots, but if they go in, you can't argue it. And so really disappointing if you're Luka. He really last year in the bubble already established himself as a one man, like just on the level of some of the best players in the game right now. But this series, non-bubble, had even more eyeballs on it because more people are in the regular flow of playoff basketball and watching television and consuming the NBA. And it was truly his coming out party. And I think a lot of people were rooting for him to go on to the second round in a year where it looks like things are wide open just across the board. And so really unfortunate that Porzingis, Tim Hardaway Jr., Trey Burke, who else ever you want to name, Brunson, even like Boban, no one could really give that secondary scoring that the Mavericks truly needed. And the Clippers got some big shots from their guys. And in the end, they managed to squeak out a 7-game series win over the Mavericks once again. A little bit more than they bargained for, but they're able to pass into the second round. And they've lined up a date with the Utah Jazz, which will be very interesting going forward.
Man, after game 6, I kind of saw it going one of two ways. Like either the Clippers totally shut Luka down again, or like Luka figures out, gets past them, and Mavericks win. I never thought I'd see, what was the stat, like 14 assists as well
Yeah.
on that 46 points. So yeah, that's damn. The one that stood out to me was Hardaway going 1 for 9 on the 3 pointers because he'd been really consistent and solid. I thought all playoffs up until that. It feels wrong to not also acknowledge Kawhi's Game 6 performance. I texted you during that because holy shit, 3, 4 like step backs in a row that were just so unguardable and so automatic. That was terrifying.
It was a treat for us to watch him in 2019 when he just played so well at such a high level for this Raptors team. I wouldn't say he carried that team because there were a lot of great players up and down the lineup, but when it was winning time, he was the guy with the ball in his hands making those kind of shots. And he turned into that Kawhi for game 6 and just fabulous, mesmerizing handle, really tight, and then hitting some really, really big shots. And that's what he's done in his career. And he's going to make a couple more of them as we move into the second round. I'm really interested to see how this matchup goes. I imagine the Clippers may start big again with Zubac, but I just picture them going small and trying to spread things out and get Rudy Gobert guarding guys on the perimeter. And then from there, it's drive and kick, open shooters in the corners. Utah is going to try and make Morris, Jackson, Batum beat you, but Gobert, I think, is going to get exposed a little bit more as opposed to a Utah or pardon me, a Memphis or a Dallas where it goes through kind of one man in a pick and roll and they have a bigger center that can't pull Gobert out. Whereas the Clippers can go small and really force Gobert to guard outside of the paint, and that takes away a lot of his effectiveness as a defender. And Utah doesn't have the size on the perimeter to guard a Kawhi and a Paul George. But then you go the other way. Do the Clippers have the necessary perimeter defenders to be able to guard a Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley, Joe Ingles, Bojan Bogdanovic, Jordan Clarkson? Beverly, I think, will play a bigger role in this series, but he looks a little bit washed at this point in his career. So if you're relying on Reggie Jackson, if you're relying on who else, like is a guard for them. I don't know if they can get enough perimeter defense either way. So it'll be really interesting to see what the outcome of this series is.
Yeah, if things go desperate, they've got Kawhi and George to match up and somehow figure out how to deal with the wings. What I'm really interested in as well is Gobert offensively, because I felt like the Clippers didn't really have an answer for Marjanovic.
Yeah.
Just there were a couple times where like it was like if you can get this guy a touch in the paint, like he's getting a fairly uncontested shot off, and as long as he was in rhythm, like he was able to have some really hot stretches. So I don't know what the ceiling on Gobert's offense is, but like if the Jazz can figure out how to get him some consistent paint touches, I can see even more damage being done from that position in this series.
Yeah, it's going to be tough because if the Clippers are switching that high pick and roll with Gobert, then he doesn't have that same effectiveness rolling into the paint in that setting where it becomes kind of 2-on-1 offense versus defense. So if the Clippers are just switching, Gobert doesn't have that polished post game that can really punish a team that decides to switch. It'll just be he will have to be a presence on the offensive glass in order for him to stay in the game. Because what we've seen is in previous series against like a Houston or Golden State, he's been run off the court. They haven't been able to play him late in games because it's just he's pulled out of the paint on defense. And then on offense, he cannot punish opposing teams who go smaller because he doesn't have the same hands in offensive game. Like even Boban, like purely his size makes him a threat, but he has great hands for someone who's that big and that tall. Whereas Gobert just doesn't have that same refined post game short jumpers. It's a lot of dunks for him. And so this could be trouble for Utah. And that's why I have the Clippers picked in 7.
Interesting. I haven't seen enough of Gobert's offense to be definitive, but it didn't take much from Marjanovic. Like just easy passes, like not even pick and rolls, just like from the top when the focus is around the perimeter, and whoever your small 4 or 5 are just couldn't get the hands up or the defense going, and it was a lot of like 5 foot, 10 foot away, like finger roll floating type makes, which yeah, I'm going to go Jazz. I don't have a number of games, but second round voodoo for the Clippers, the first place team in the West. And maybe I'm going to eat my words on this, but I don't think it's going to take all that much special from Gobert. Like some simple stuff could do a lot of damage in the middle.